3 people. Let's go. Let's go. 3v1. 3v1. Okay, one dead. One dead. Hold a barb. Hold a barb. Other guy's dead. Hold a barb knocked on ground. Dead. Triple kill. Let's go. How fast can we kill the champion's demise boss? Well, let's go find out. I mean, I don't even need to do anything. It's already dead. Got the druid. Oh, he's dead. Oh, there's another person. Dazed. You're dead. Oh, another one. They just keep on coming. I'm not gonna get frozen. You think I'm gonna get frozen? Got one. Oh my gosh, dude, how many people are getting slayed by me? Holy. And this video is brought to you by Signal RGB with their sweet giveaway that they're doing. So Skytech Gaming, Intel, and Signal RGB came together to make this custom Diablo 4 inspired PC. And these potions that you're seeing actually react in real time with the Signal RGB app that syncs to an RGB device that works from any brand. And on top of that, this custom hand-painted PC is rocking an Intel 13600K and an RTX 4070. If you guys would like to enter the giveaway, click on the link in the video description and in the pinned comment. Welcome back, guys, for our final installment of the best rogue build, which is going to be at level 100. So the progression to 90 to 100, what's the big differences right here? It all comes down to min-maxing, getting your pieces of gear as perfect as possible. Keep in mind, not everyone is going to have perfect pieces of gear towards the end game. Even if you play for maybe 1,000 hours, like I used to play a lot of Diablo 2, people have been playing for thousands and thousands of hours, may still never get the best rolls on every single piece of gear. So it's okay if they're not going to be perfect, but that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to get everything as perfect as possible. And you might notice the skill bar here, there are missing skills. Why is that? Well, I'll get into that because that's kind of the main focus of this video. So when it comes down to going to level 100, when you start getting powerful enough in the Diablo games, specifically let's say Diablo 3 for example, most people can do Torment 16, which is the hardest difficulty, and you can mix and match different skills and they can be the best for you. The point of any video game at the end of the day is to have fun, and I always like to build my characters with some sort of flexibility. Now, the great thing with twisting blades in terms of a rogue build, it is by far the best melee rogue build in the game. There's no one that's gonna question that. You only really need to have 2 skills. The main skill, obviously, you have to play twisting blades, but I've also gave you guys a shadow build, which is really great as well, which again, I'll pin down below, and you can kind of hybrid out your build to your playstyle. However, with the most recent update, they actually buffed Shadow Step to actually not have as many glitches as it previously had. In fact, I was talking about how you can drop this skill completely because it's currently bugged, and it was bugged for a really long time, and now I would say it's like 99% fixed. So the most recent update made it so Shadow Step actually properly works without you freezing in place sometimes when the target would be outside of the registration on the box in which Shadow Step can register at. This skill is so incredibly good now, not only for PvP but for PvE, specifically being able to get your extra crit chance on the boss or any single target, specifically on elites, is really good. It's just 8% crit, and that helps out because most builds with rogues can achieve about 80-ish% crit once you are in the end game. But other than that, you can play what you want to play, and I'll give you guys some different ideas here. So because I'm going to at least give you guys a skill bar so you're not completely like, you know, left in the dark over here in terms of like, well, what's the best build? Pretty much the Trapper build for PvE is going to be super good. I've even showed you guys clips from PvP. I was dominating lobbies. I was doing 1v4s consistently with this build. And the thing is that it is kind of a skill issue. I'm not going to say that there isn't a skill gap with Rogue because it's a little bit more difficult to play than, let's say, a Hoda Barb, which can genuinely one-shot most people in the entire game when you build it correct. But the thing is Rogue can outplay that, but it will require you to have some knowledge, and it's kind of up to you what you want to play. Do you want to run the Shadow build, or do you want to run the Trapper build? At the end of the day, Twisting Blades is a little bit more flexible in its gear slot. It's basically just these 2 skills at the end of the day. There's a lot of different variations that you can run. But the main thing that I wanted to go over is essentially not only the Paragon boards in terms of the choices, because you can swap this to be more poison if you want to, and a very consistent question that I was always getting asked, yo, I saw you play Shadow, I saw you play poison, which one do you like? I literally just mix it up just so I can have a little bit more fun with the game. Now, what does Shadow do? Shadow allows you to basically clear up the trash mobs a little bit easier, while Poison is superior by a long shot for either PvP or during bosses. I'm talking about any of the pinnacle bosses, but most of the time, even with Shadow Imbuement, I can melt the bosses in a few seconds. The difference between killing a boss in, let's say, 2 seconds versus killing it in 4 seconds, is it that big of a deal? Well, in theory, the DPS is a lot higher, but in terms of doing the dungeons, Shadow Imbuement is going to be better for speed clears because it's going to give you more resource on average. There comes to a point where maybe your build is so good with specifically Penitent Greaves and having the Umbral aspect that you can just one-shot most of the things in the entire Nightmare dungeons, with, of course, the exception if you're doing Sigil level 100, which honestly most people will never get to, and it's not really designed, at least as of right now, most builds aren't even going to be designed to do that because the world tier doesn't scale high enough for items to actually match it. A lot of builds are kind of cheesing their way through at the current state, so if you're wondering, like, you know, in terms of doing Sigils 100, you're probably looking at doing some sort of cheese with some sort of like freeze, or if you want to play rapid fire, that is another option, but most of the builds generally aren't designed to actually do Sigil 100. But if you really are consistent and you're persistent enough, yeah, you can do it with pretty much any build. It's just you have to take one monster at a time and kind of play it very, very slow. So starting right off, in terms of our skills over here, nothing's really changed too much. It's just if you want to run Shadow, you can run Shadow. If you want to run Poison, you can do so as well. Now, another thing that I wanted to mainly go over in this video is trying to get the correct stats on the pieces of gear. This is actually the most important part from going from 90 to 100 is to get the correct stats. And what I mean by that is I get consistently asked, you know, Slater, what is the best stats on my piece of gear, and is this okay? So starting right off, the core stats that are going to give you way more damage and let you one-shot things is going to come down to vulnerable damage, critical strike damage, core skill damage, and dexterity. So those 4 stats are kind of the most important ones, but it's essentially just getting those 3. The last one, you could get damage to close if you want to instead of dexterity. I highly value dexterity because of the way dodge works in this game, and I've been talking about how like underrated dodge is, but honestly, it's kind of up to you on what you want to go for in terms of last like stat over here. But primarily get everything to be 5 out of 5, and this all increases all of the stats, but also getting your aspect. So like with Twisting Blades, the first number goes from 20 to 30, and then the other number goes from 40 to 60. The two numbers technically are correlated, so if you get a perfect 30, it's always going to be 60. But you want to try to get an aspect that is absolutely perfect and save that one for a weapon that is good enough. So in our case, we're going to be wanting to use our two-hander to actually put this on. Now, the difference between getting, say, something that says damage to poison enemies, right? That could be something that, yes, this build can do. However, you want to maximize your uptime on any DPS. Or, for example, damage to slowed enemies, chilled enemies, because we have, let's say, the Penitent Greaves, which chills everything. Now, the difference between boss kill time is really coming down to, well, can the target actually be chilled? Can the target actually be affected by whatever you're doing? There are certain stats in the game that aren't going to have 100% uptime. Like, let's say, for example, we get bonus damage to knockdown or any of these conditional targets where from poison, we can always poison the boss, but we can't always daze or knock down certain targets because they might be unstoppable or immune until we reach that bar. That's the biggest difference between a build that is going to be more consistent in damage versus, well, it can do damage when these conditions are met. And that's what you really want to roll. So let's go ahead and go over that, as that's going to be the main focus of the video. Now, with one of the intro clips, you saw me play with a different skill, and that different skill is the concealment. So this one lets us have unstoppable, and I really do value that. But there's another change. When we got the buff to Shadow Step, I actually really like the 2 charges of Shadow Step. Now, you will have to sacrifice your amulet slot if you want to go for this. You can get another aspect to do more damage if you want to, but at the end of the day, the things that are going to get you killed majority of the time in Diablo 4 are going to be when you're completely frozen, like you cannot react to things. So that would be the ideal thing to have, not only for defenses, but on top of that, getting 2 of these is going to let you have that extra bonus 8% crit on either 2 different targets, which can actually help out if there's multiple like elites, but also just having extra, you know, charge is good because it's just up more frequently. But let's go ahead and go over the main pieces of gear and what you really are looking forward to getting. Now, there is a few different options that you can run in terms of the aspect. I really do like this lucky hit when you crowd control. There's a chance for it to spread because when we activate a crowd control, this restores us energy. At the end of the day, a lot of people always ask, yo, can I run this aspect? Can I run this aspect? Hey, play what you want to, but I try to make my builds as friendly as possible for players to not have to use a generator. That is the biggest thing that you really want to drop when you're hitting level 100 for most builds. Now, if you're doing one of those slow builds for a Sigil 100, you will more than likely need a generator. But again, this is for like the 0.001%, and I'd rather make this build guide video for the 99% of players versus, again, the 0.001% that will even attempt Sigil 100 on a Twisting Blade rogue. So it's up to you in terms of the gems, what you want to run. You can run topazes or you can run rubies. I always recommend rubies just because those little sentry bows, the skeleton ones, those do a massive amount of damage, and it really comes down to either dodging those or, well, being able to have more HP would actually help you out as well. So it's up to you on the gems. This doesn't really change too much, but you really need to focus in on this because I have a lot of people that come into my live stream. They're like, how come you're way tankier than I did when I copied your build? It comes down to, well, you didn't copy it as correct as you should. And I'm trying to go ahead and focus more on your pieces of gear in terms of roles on this video, because in terms of the gameplay and the build, nothing has changed. I've already explained the rotation. All you do is you activate your traps when you see a decent group, and you just eliminate everything with your Twisting Blades. You don't need to spam Twisting Blades until the target's dead. Usually I will hit one target like you see right there, and I'll just literally walk away, because I know that my damage is high enough that when the Twisting Blades gets unimpaled and flies towards me, the target's going to be dead anyways. So going down to speed and efficiency comes down to being able to understand you do enough damage. Like you can see right there, I already know that the target is going to be dead after I just impale it once. So you want to get your damage as high as possible, and then once you start realizing, well, I don't have to sit there and keep on Twisting Blades, so I'm not out of resource, because that's another thing that goes into the gameplay here. You really want to get your cooldown reductions. That really helps out, and your maximum life. Those are the two main stats that you want to get on your helmet. For the rest of them, you know, it's kind of up to you. Additionally, getting armor is great, but I like this lucky hit. Crowd controlling gives me more resource, and it is kind of helpful. It technically gives me a little bit more survivability as well, because if the target is knocked down or it has all these negative conditions, right, they're not going to be able to be doing damage to me. But there's lots of different things that you can run in terms of the aspects for this slot over here. Now, in terms of the chest piece, it's kind of up to you if you want to get damage reduction from distance and close, because again, I've mentioned those bow shots as well as lightning damage in general. This is what gets a lot of people killed in hardcore, but if you don't want to run damage reduction from distance enemies, that's totally fine, but you really want to get that damage reduction from close and life. Those are the two important stats. You also want the aspect of disobedience that we have that gives us up to 50% additional armor. This is insane. I'm honestly going to be surprised if next season they do not nerf this at all. This thing is absolutely amazing. And then next up, in terms of our gloves over here, there's nothing really too important other than getting all the correct stats. That's crit chance, that's attack speed, that's getting your Twisting Blades ring. You want the +4. You got to get a +3 to drop on the floor, and then you upgrade it. As long as it's a 725 or higher, you upgrade that, and then you will get the +4 to Twisting Blades. There is no unique, by the way, that can really outshine this other than maybe a perfectly rolled 300% or 280 or higher if you want to run the Fists of Fate, but there really isn't a better slot. So nothing has really changed in terms of our pieces of gear, but I'm trying to highlight the important parts of going to 100. You need to get a lot of these things as perfect as possible. With the pants, the only thing that you really need to get is that maximum life, and then any other forms of some sort of damage mitigation. That could be dodge chance, armor, damage reduction from close or far, or if you're running the poison trap with the poison, you can get damage reduction from enemies that are poison. There's a lot of different options here. Again, there are a lot of flexible things in the defensive category. For the boot category, there really isn't too much of a better option other than Penitent Greaves. You lose too much when you swap to something else. You're losing out on a 20% X multiplier, which is massive, because Control is a fantastic choice option if you want to run in the Glyphs. We'll also go over other Glyphs, because that's kind of be the other part of this video, because once you reach level 100 compared to like 90, which is our previous one, you really want to focus in on trying to min-max getting every single point of damage that you can get, and this is going to be by far a long shot. Now, just as a heads up, some targets like the bosses, you can't just chill the enemy or freeze the enemy a lot easier, so you have to wait for the stagger bar. So if you want to, there are other options that you can run, like, which we'll get into when we get into the Paragon board. But for the most part, Penitent Greaves are going to be the best. I know that they are kind of rare, but the point is, well, this is level 100. These are not like a Shaco rare. You can get these. I believe in you. If you haven't dropped them, they will drop eventually. Just keep playing, I promise. Next up, though, in terms of the bow, you do not need to run a bow ever. The crossbow is going to be the best, and this is something very important, because you want it for the vulnerable damage, because the damage buckets. And then I already went over the stats on this, so yeah, you want that vulnerable damage, crit damage, core damage. I really like dexterity. It's a highly recommended, but if you can get all stats, it can hit certain thresholds on your Paragon board, because everyone's build is going to be different. Like my helmet, for a really long time, it was not like this. Instead of having the dexterity, which I would prefer, it had +2 all stats, which was actually a pretty decent thing, and it let me hit extra thresholds, because everyone's build is nowhere near going to be perfect perfect every single time. You may have like on your gloves, well, you have +2, you know, willpower, and it's like kind of a worthless stat, but you realize, wait, on my Paragon board, it gives me 16% extra core skill damage, or, you know, other sort of stats, if that makes any sense. So don't always think you have to copy everyone's build, because everyone's build on the Paragon board may be a little bit different here. So in terms of our amulet, this is one change that I really like, getting the 2 bonuses on Shadow Step. You can only craft it in the boots as well as your amulet, but I really like the change with the most recent. It's technically a bug fix, but it is a huge, massive change, because in this game I used to play with concealment consistently because I need more forms of remove CC, but this gives me 2 stacks and I really have been enjoying it. But yeah, cooldown reduction, movement speed, energy cost reduction, and then if you get, you know, trap cooldown, that's awesome. I mean, I still don't have perfect rolls, and my cooldowns are really good. There's lots of times where I'm able to get my trap cooldown up very fast again to reset a resource. You really want to try to get this aspect, the Ravenous, and that's going to give us extra resource. A lot of times, even now, I'm still getting questions as to how come my resource is so insane when I'm streaming. This is a consistent question. Maybe people didn't follow the build, and they're just coming into the stream, they're like, dude, your rogue is insane. How do you have no generator? It comes down to getting a good roll on your Ravenous. That's going to give you 70% regen. That's like almost, it's more than like, you know, 50% of your regen, which is massive for the rogue. And it's just as long as you kill an enemy with that. And the boss, you're going to usually kill so fast. I mean, you saw in the intro clip, we just snapped that like champion's demise boss in a frame. And then on top of that, getting the Umbral aspect, you got to get this to 4, okay? This one is, sometimes people say this is rare. I've honestly got so many, but you know, that's the luck sometimes with any action RPG. You just get lucky, right? But getting this to be as high roll as possible, getting that to 4. And on your rings, this is very important. You want your crit strike chance to be absolutely perfect. It rolls on a 5. This must be perfect in order for you to even consider even rolling the ring, because, well, unless you're going to reroll the crit. You want crit strike damage, you want vulnerable damage, you want crit strike chance, but the crit strike chance is by far the most important thing, because crit strike chance, you can get vulnerable damage, crit damage on a lot of different things, and it's still good to get it. However, getting that bonus is going to be just so hard to get crit strike chance anywhere in Diablo 4. That's just the way the game was designed. So you want to get that 7.5 when it goes to 5 out of 5. So it starts off at 5, but it goes to 7.5. That's the most important thing. Getting extra life really helps out with survivability. This is something where in PvP, I'm just dominating because I have so much more life. That's how I can do like 1v4s consistently. And also, I'll be honest, like when I used to play a game called Here's the Storm, which is kind of related to this game in terms of PvP, it's a MOBA game, kind of like League of Legends, which is similar in terms of combat. I'm just going to warn you guys, don't expect that you can go in and 1v4 with this build because you're like, oh, I copied his build. He did it. I must be able to do. A lot of things are going to be a little bit of a skill issue, and I don't mean to discourage players by, you know, just saying, well, just get good. You don't think that just because I'm able to do it, you're going to be able to do it too. I've been playing games for a really long time. We were rank 1 in Here's the Storm. This season we were rank 2 for Diablo 3, and it comes down to just being able to be fast and efficient and knowing how certain animations work. Like, for example, like when a sorceress has like one hand out, you're going to know that, oh, I can shadow step and hit the target. There's a lot of min-maxing, and I'm not going to get into PvP in this video because I'll reserve that for another one, but this is like really high level stuff when you're trying to pull off 1v4s. It's not going to be super easy, okay? But over here with our swords, now, you want to drop daggers completely when you hit 100. Reason why? They roll with crit strike damage as the implicit. You want to get vulnerable, crit strike damage, core skill. If you get damage to close, it's okay, but the difference between damage via like poison or any of these conditions, daze, the thing is it has to be meeting that condition, where core, I can be super far away. I'm going to impale and run far away, and then I'm losing out on that close skill damage, right? It's going to be much better. As far as the aspects go, I really love this one to get the massive extra ability to, once I make the enemy vulnerable, because if we have exploit, it's just going to make everything vulnerable. So basically, it's just a 50% chance lucky hit that we get 3% crit, and it's pretty easy to keep up, and I really like this one. There's another option if you want to run Temerity, which I will briefly talk about. You can run Barrier, and I was running Temerity for a long time, but honestly, since we're level 100, I'm trying to give you guys the best of the best advice. Temerity loses out to having Dodge Chance. Dodge Chance is like one of the most OP stats in the game, but maximum life is huge as well, because how some Pinnacle boss fights were actually won is because people are getting extra offensive stats on piece of gear, and they're just relying on Dodge Chance, which is, it's a pretty interesting thing to do. But when you're looking at speed runs and to min-max, getting the best of the best, you might have to do weird things where you actually end up swapping pieces of gear in between to get, you know, the min-max out of DPS. But yeah, both the swords are going to be the same. One of them running the critical strikes with core skills gives us extra attack speed. I like this. This makes the game feel much better. I was also running the Edge Masters, but there's a lot of different options in terms of the offensive aspects. If you want to mix and match, hey, if your resource is all good, you're like, hey, I can squeeze in some extra damage. I could do the poison pool one. Hey, do what you want to do. I want to give you guys as much flexibility with this build. In terms of the skill bar, again, I've shown multiple ones, but if you want to run concealment, that can be an option. And if you want to drop, let's say, Dark Shroud, and you want to run dash, that's another popular thing. Hey, do what you want to do. Honestly, these are the only two skills that I would say they are pretty much required for the build. Now, if you're doing like the Trapper build, yes. Now, I've had a few people talk about the Paragon board, and I do want to get into this because this is kind of the main part of it. So a lot of people have asked, what are the other good Paragon board options? You can get Cheap Shot, Ambush, Frost Feeder. Those are all excellent ones to actually grab. There's actually a legendary node to get extra damage after the enemy is affected by trap. Like, if people are looking at this and they're thinking, well, it's a trap build, how come you're not running the trap board? I try to make the builds flexible for you guys in most circumstances because I want you guys to be able to experiment and do other things. And I've always talked about being able to be 100% efficient with your build versus getting cosmetic screenshot YouTube clickbait when you're like, dude, I hit for, like, because there's penetrating shot builds that can hit for like 10 plus mil, right? Or you can scale it up even further if you want to get an overpower one and be like, oh guys, look at this rogue build I screenshotted, I hit for 50 million damage. I want to give you guys real numbers because a lot of these, well, it's cool to have like a good video thumbnail and stuff. The thing is that are they doing that every single time? The answer is more than likely not. They're going to have to use a generator. This is one thing that I've been talking about with Hoda Barb. Yeah, you can screenshot overpower hitting for insane numbers, and then people would go copy and they're like, well, I'm not hitting for this, what's going on? And the thing is that it's great for people to use for, cool, highlights for a TikTok. But the thing is that getting bonus damage to when a lot of conditions are met is not going to be as realistic and efficient as a build that is just going to be up with more uptime versus using a generator, making sure you're lining up the penetrating shot, make sure you dash through all the targets for the crit multi to proc, getting all of your combo points ready. Does that make more sense? Hopefully this makes a lot more sense, and it adds a little bit more validity to this sort of content. But in terms of the Paragon board, the main thing that I'm going to also link this, but you want to run exploit for sure. You want to run, actually this is nice, you can see. So we're going to run control, exploit, and again, I won't go over every single node. Keep in mind, some people's nodes can be a little bit different if you need to hit like 5 different stats on a certain thing. But yeah, we're running exploit, and then we're running control, and then turf is basically a must. And then at the very end, you can run combat. I actually really like combat. Some of you guys were mentioning your resources weren't perfect, and I think combat is going to be an excellent choice for most of you guys. But again, Cheap Shot, Ambush, Frost Feeder, all these different like nodes, legendary nodes, or just even on the glyphs can be great options. If you want to run Bane, you want to do more poison damage, hey, feel free to experiment and do things that may suit your build's needs. Another great thing with this exploit weakness thing over here, if you want to, you can try to push for this and you can, drop another thing. I really just value having more uptime on damage versus like, oh, I have to reach a condition because I'm killing the bosses so fast it doesn't matter. Now, of course, there's an exception. I can't like kill, Uber Lilith in 3 seconds. That's just not realistic for most builds unless it's doing some sort of cheat, at least as of right now. I try to give you guys builds where like you're moving as fast as possible. This is a very frequently asked question. How do I move so fast? It comes down getting it on your amulet, getting it on your boots, but also getting it on your Paragon board, getting that extra movement speed after you're killing elite. Hey, look at how much movement speed we get if we get this condition met, which dexterity is easy to hit for us. So, I mean, we're getting an extra 14% movement speed, another 7, another 7. That's huge right there. Just with this alone, that's 28% additional movement speed, right? And on top of that, we already have 185. That means as long as we kill an elite, we're going to be 200%. But on top of that, I like running Dark Shroud to get me capped out 200% when I'm not in combat. And when I'm in combat, I actually have in terms of the skill tree, and I'll briefly go over this. Nothing has really changed though. It's kind of up to you on what you want to put in. Do you want to run Shadow Imbuement? Do you want to run Poison Imbuement? Do you want to run Traps? Do you not want to run Traps? Do you like Concealment? Again, that's why I gave you guys the flexibility of just those are the 2 skills I say are pretty much a must. Honestly, Shadow Step, if you really don't want to run, you don't have to. But it recently got such a huge change that like bug fix is just absolutely massive. If you want to run a generator, right? If you're doing certain things like Uber Lilith, you might want to run a generator just to apply vulnerability, which could be something where you need to put another point into. Do what you want to do. The build guide will be linked in the pinned comment. But yeah, hope this will give you guys the idea of like what you want to try to achieve in the process from 90 to 100 is basically getting all the things that I mentioned in terms of the rolls and getting it as high as possible. That's the next step. And that's all part of the min-maxing. But that's going to wrap things up. If you guys enjoyed the video, drop a like on it. And if you're new here and you do want to be up to date, of course, when the season drops, we will also cover a update to it. So subscribe, turn that bell, and definitely don't forget to check out that giveaway in the pinned comment as well as the description. And I'll catch you guys on this video. Peace.